The fired mechanic passed by the workshop until his former boss begged him to fix a car. The morning of Friday, March 15th, dawned with that gray sky characteristic of Guadalajara, when the rainy season has not yet come to an end. Rodrigo Mendoza arrived at the Rodriguez workshop at 7 o'clock sharp, as he had done for the past 15 years. The smell of motor oil and hot metal greeted him as usual, but something in the atmosphere felt different. The other mechanics avoided his gaze, and Chuy, his closest colleague, barely gave him an inaudible good morning. Rodrigo put on his navy blue overalls, worn at the knees and stained from countless battles with rebellious engines. At 45, his calloused hands told stories of thousands of repairs, from humble Volkswagen sedans to luxury SUVs that arrived from the residential neighborhoods of Zapopan. No engine could resist him. There was no mechanical problem he couldn't diagnose just by listening to the irregular purr of a car. Don Esteban Rodriguez, the owner of the workshop, showed up at 9 in the morning. He was a robust 60-year-old man with a gray mustache and a prominent belly that revealed his fondness for Doña Chonita's tortas ahogadas. Rodrigo had known him since the workshop was just a garage with 2 lifts. He had seen the business grow. He had worked side by side with Don Esteban when they were just 2 men with a shared dream. "Rodrigo, I need to talk to you in the office," said Don Esteban without looking him in the eye. His tone was dry, distant. Rodrigo felt a chill run down his spine. He left the wrench on the hood of the Nissan Suru he was working on and followed his boss to the small office that overlooked Lopez Cotilla Street. The office smelled of old armor and stale coffee. The walls were covered with spare parts calendars and photographs of the workshop at different times. In one of them, Rodrigo and Don Esteban were smiling next to the first car they repaired together, a mint green 1975 Chevrolet Nova. Rodrigo remembered that day as if it were yesterday. "Look," Rodrigo began, Don Esteban settling into his swivel chair, which creaked under his weight. "This isn't easy for me. You've been a loyal employee. No one can deny that, but times are tough, costs are rising, and competition is becoming increasingly aggressive. I have to make adjustments." Rodrigo felt his stomach tighten. "Adjustments? I need to reduce the payroll. I've hired 2 kids who just graduated from Conalep. They're good, they have energy, and, well, they work for less." Don Esteban finally looked him in the eye. "I'm sorry, Rodrigo, your severance package is ready. It's been 15 years, you're entitled to a good amount." Rodrigo's world stopped. 15 years of early mornings, of injured hands, of solving the impossible, of training every new mechanic who came to the shop. 15 years reduced to a spreadsheet where his experience weighed less than the salary of 2 inexperienced young people. "Don Esteban," I tried to speak, but the words stuck in my throat. "It's already been decided, Rodrigo. It's not personal, it's business." Don Esteban slid a manila envelope across the desk. "Here's your severance pay. You can check the numbers with your lawyer if you want." Rodrigo took the envelope with trembling hands. It wasn't the amount of money that hurt, although he knew that with 2 daughters in high school and a wife who worked part-time in a grocery store, every peso counted. What really devastated him was the feeling of betrayal. Don Esteban wasn't just his boss, or at least that's what he had believed. He was his compadre, his eldest daughter's confirmation godfather, the man with whom he had shared cold beers after exhausting days at work. "When do you want me to leave?" Rodrigo asked. His voice was barely a whisper. "Today would be best. We'll avoid awkward situations with the other employees." Don Esteban had already turned his attention to some papers on his desk, as if the conversation were over. Rodrigo left the office feeling the stares of his colleagues. Chuy approached him and put a hand on his shoulder, but said nothing. There was nothing to say in the work area. 2 young men no older than 20, wearing new overalls and looking anxious, were already occupying his space. They were Kevin and Brandon, names that Don Esteban pronounced with obvious effort, accustomed to the Jose Luis and Franciscos of his generation. Rodrigo methodically cleaned his toolbox. Every wrench, every screwdriver, every socket had a story. Those tools had been his most important investment when he started in the trade, buying them little by little with his first paycheck. He wrapped them carefully in an old rag and placed them in his canvas backpack. As he left the workshop, the sun had finally broken through the gray clouds. The bright light seemed like a cruel mockery. He walked aimlessly down Lopez Cotilla, the weight of his toolbox less heavy than the humiliation he carried in his chest. The basket tacos at Dom Pancho's stand on the corner smelled the same as always. Life went on for everyone except him. When he arrived at his home in the Santa Elena neighborhood, a modest two-story building with a faded orange facade, his wife Lupita greeted him at the door. She only needed to see his face to understand. There were no reproaches, just a silent hug that lasted longer than any words could have. That night, Rodrigo couldn't sleep, staring at the cracked ceiling of his bedroom, wondering how he would tell his daughters that they might not be able to continue at the private high school, that their dreams of college would have to wait. The first days of unemployment were the hardest. Rodrigo got up at 6 a.m. out of habit, but instead of getting ready for work, he found himself drinking coffee in his small kitchen, listening to the news on the radio while Lupita got ready for her shift at the grocery store, La Guadalupana. His daughters, Fernanda and Monica, aged 17 and 16 respectively, hurried off to high school, aware of the new tension in the home, but not daring to ask directly. The severance pay was enough to cover the school fees for the 2-month period and some overdue expenses. But Rodrigo knew that the money would not last forever. He began to look for work with a desperation he tried to hide behind a mask of calm, printing copies of his resume at the cyber cafe on the corner, each sheet costing 3 pesos that now weighed as if they were 30. He visited auto repair shops throughout the metropolitan area. At the Garcia shop in Lacapaca, they told him they were looking for assistants, not specialists, at Auto Service Millennium. Near the Minerva roundabout, the manager reviewed his resume and shook his head. 45 years old is too old. We're looking for younger people who are more adaptable to new technologies. The irony was bitter, considering that Rodrigo had constantly trained himself by taking courses in electronic diagnostics and modern injection systems with his own money. Franchise repair shop chains such as Autos and Firestone required specific certifications that he did not have, official documents that validated what his hands knew how to do instinctively. The system did not recognize 15 years of practical experience, only papers with stamps and signatures. That's how Rodrigo began to take on odd jobs. Don Memo, a neighbor in the neighborhood, paid him 500 pesos to change the water pump on his Chevy pickup truck. Mrs. Cuevas needed to have the electrical system on her pointer checked, another 300 pesos. Lupita's cousin, who lived in Tonalá, had a Jetta with transmission problems. Once had 1,000 pesos for 3 days of work under the scorching April sun. Each job required him to travel around the city. Sometimes he walked miles to save the 12 pesos for the bus. Guadalajara is a city that stretches out mercilessly, and his feet soon knew every crack in the broken sidewalks, every pothole in the poorly paved streets. His knees, already battered from years of crouching work, protested every night with a dull pain that icy hot barely relieved. The worst part was not the physical labor or the economic uncertainty. The worst part was the inevitable route that took him past the Rodriguez workshop every day. He lived in Santa Elena, and most of his odd jobs were in neighborhoods near downtown. Lopez Cotilla was a necessary stop, and every time he passed the workshop, something twisted inside his chest. At first, he avoided looking. He kept his eyes fixed ahead with iron determination. But curiosity is stronger than pride, and little by little, he began to observe. The first few days, the workshop seemed to be operating normally. The same cars parked outside, the same movement as always. Kevin and Brandon, the new employees, worked with the energy of youth, although Rodrigo noticed from a distance their lack of refined technique. Weeks passed, and Rodrigo began to notice subtle changes. A customer arguing heatedly with Don Esteban at the workshop door, a Ram truck that had been parked there for over a week, a sign that something couldn't be fixed. The paint on the facade, always impeccable, was beginning to show damp spots that no one had cleaned. One particularly hot afternoon in May, Rodrigo passed by just as Chuy was leaving the workshop with a frustrated look on his face. Their eyes met. Chuy made an almost imperceptible gesture, a mixture of apology and recognition, but they did not stop to talk. They both knew that loyalties in a mechanic's workshop are complicated when livelihoods are at stake. Rodrigo arrived home that night after changing the clutch on a Jetta in an open garage in Oblatos. The sun had burned the back of his neck. His hands were black with grease that cheap soap could barely remove, and he had earned 800 pesos, which would barely cover the week's groceries. Lupita served him a plate of rice and beans and a piece of chicken stretched out so that there would be enough for everyone. "How did it go?" she asked, her voice tired after 10 hours of serving customers in the store. "Fine," Rodrigo lied. "I have another job tomorrow. Don Alfredo's friend needs me to check his Zuru." Fernanda and Monica ate in silence. Rodrigo knew they had overheard bits and pieces of conversations and understood that things were difficult. Fernanda, the eldest, had mentioned the possibility of looking for a part-time job, but Rodrigo had flatly refused. His daughters had to study. That was their chance to get ahead, to not end up like him, depending on odd jobs and the charity of acquaintances. That night, lying in the dark, Rodrigo thought about Don Esteban. He wondered if his former boss thought about him, if he felt any remorse. Probably not. In the business world, loyalty is a luxury that few can afford. Rodrigo understood that in theory, but his heart still bled betrayal. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. June arrived with torrential rains that flooded the streets of downtown. Rodrigo continued to pass by the Rodriguez workshop, now more frequently because jobs were scarce, and he had begun to offer his services at the tool market on Calzada Independencia every Sunday. His handwritten sign read, "Rodrigo Mendoza, specialized mechanic, diagnosis and repair, 15 years of experience, affordable prices." The workshop was still there, but it didn't look the same. The clientele had visibly decreased. Don Esteban had aged noticeably in those few months. His face showed lines of worry that weren't there before. The young guys were still working, but Rodrigo could read in their body language the frustration of facing problems that exceeded their experience. Part of Rodrigo felt vindicated, but it was a bitter victory. There was no real satisfaction in seeing something he had helped build fall apart. The Rodriguez workshop had been his second home, and seeing it decline was like watching a loved one fall ill, even if that loved one had betrayed him. It was a Tuesday in early July when everything changed. The mid-morning sun was beating down with unusual intensity, and Rodrigo was walking down Lopez Cotilla after dropping off his resume at a tire repair shop that was supposedly looking for staff. They weren't actually hiring, but the owner, a friendly woman in her 60s, had accepted the paper out of courtesy, promising to call him if anything came up. Rodrigo knew she wouldn't. He was wearing a light blue denim shirt, faded but clean, and his best work pants. His tool backpack hung from his shoulder, its familiar weight now both his livelihood and his burden. He had lost almost 18 pounds since being laid off, not from dieting, but from a combination of stress, constant worry, and increasingly austere meals. As he approached the Rodriguez workshop, he saw unusual movement. There was a black 2020 Chevrolet Suburban SUV parked right in front, a luxurious vehicle that stood out among the more modest cars in the neighborhood. It was the kind of car that belonged in the residential areas of Zapopan or Puerta de Hierro, not in this working-class corner of Guadalajara. A man in a gray suit was talking heatedly with Don Esteban at the entrance to the workshop. His gestures indicated barely contained frustration. Rodrigo tried to go unnoticed, quickening his pace, his eyes fixed ahead, but then he heard his name spoken with an urgency he couldn't ignore. "Rodrigo, Rodrigo, wait." It was Don Esteban. His voice was laden with desperation. Rodrigo stopped, his body tense. For a moment he considered walking on, pretending he hadn't heard, but his upbringing won out over his resentment. He turned slowly. Don Esteban was running toward him, or rather jogging heavily. His body was not built for speed. He arrived panting, his forehead beaded with sweat. Up close, Rodrigo could see the deep circles under his eyes, his unkempt mustache, his wrinkled shirt. This was not the neat and confident Don Esteban he knew. "Rodrigo, thank God I caught up with you," said Don Esteban between heavy breaths. "I need to ask you a favor, a huge favor." Rodrigo said nothing, just looked at him with a mixture of curiosity and distrust. The man in the gray suit watched them from a distance, his arms crossed, his impatience evident. "It's that Suburban," Don Esteban continued, pointing to the vehicle. "It belongs to Mr. Morales. He's a corporate lawyer. He has several businesses in the area. He brought it in prior 10 days ago with an engine problem that no one has been able to solve. It loses power intermittently. The check engine light comes on and off, and there's a strange noise when accelerating. My guys have tried everything. They changed sensors, checked the fuel system, scanned codes. Nothing works. Rodrigo listened silently. He was familiar with these kinds of problems, the ones that defied apparent logic, the ones that required not only technical knowledge but also intuition developed through years of experience. The lawyer is furious, Don Esteban continued, his voice almost pleading. He's an important client. He refers other clients of his level to me. If I don't solve this, I not only lose his business, I lose his recommendation. And believe me, Rodrigo, I need every client I can get. Things, things haven't been going well since you left. The choice of words did not go unnoticed by Rodrigo. Since you left me, no, since I fired you. Even in his desperation, Don Esteban couldn't fully admit his mistake. I didn't leave, Don Esteban. You fired me, said Rodrigo. His voice was calm but firm. You replaced me with guys who work for less, remember? Because costs were rising and the competition was aggressive. Don Esteban looked down. You're right, it was a mistake that has cost me dearly. The guys are good. They're willing, but they lack what you have, that ability to understand cars, to diagnose what others can't. Silence stretched between them, heavy as the humid July air. The noise of the city surrounded them, the impatient honking of a truck, the cry of a corn vendor, the barking of strayed Awesums. But in that space between Rodrigo and Don Esteban, there was only the weight of months of resentment and the desperation of the moment. What exactly do you want from me? Rodrigo finally asked. I want you to check the Suburban, find the problem, and fix it. I'll pay you, of course, whatever you charge for the job. No haggling. Don Esteban took a worn wallet out of his back pocket. I can give you an advance right now if you need it. Rodrigo looked at the Suburban. It was a beautiful beast of a machine. It probably cost more than $1,000,000. The kind of vehicle he had rarely had the opportunity to repair, reserved for official agencies and specialized workshops in residential areas. A part of him, the professional part that had never died despite everything, felt curious. What problem could it have that had defeated other mechanics? But another part, the part that was still bleeding from the betrayal, wanted to turn around and keep walking. He wanted Don Esteban to feel the same helplessness he had felt that Friday in March when the world collapsed around him. Why should I help you? Rodrigo asked, his voice more sad than angry. You threw me away as if 15 years meant nothing. You replaced me without a second thought, and now you come to me for help because you are better than me, Don Esteban replied. And for the first time in all the years they had known each other, Rodrigo saw tears in his former boss's eyes. Because I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, and I don't know how to fix it. The workshop is going under, Rodrigo. Customers are leaving because the work isn't getting done right. I have debts with suppliers, with the bank. If I lose this client, if Mr. Morales speaks ill of me. He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. Rodrigo understood perfectly the importance of reputation in this business. One dissatisfied customer could destroy years of work with a few words in the WhatsApp group. Right. Rodrigo looked at his hands, those calloused hands that had built his identity. He thought of Lupita working long hours at the grocery store. He thought of Fernanda and Monica studying with borrowed books because there was no money to buy new ones. He thought of his pride that kept him walking tall despite everything. It was worth sacrificing for a job that would probably pay him a few thousand pesos. But he also thought about something deeper. He thought about his love for cars, for the challenge of solving the unsolvable. He thought that maybe, just maybe, this was bigger than his relationship with Don Esteban. It was about who he was at his core, a mechanic who couldn't leave a problem unsolved, a man who defined his worth by the quality of his work. How much time do I have? He finally asked. Don Esteban's eyes lit up with hope. The lawyer gave me until Friday, 3 days. Rodrigo nodded slowly. Let me talk to him, and I want to see everything that's already been done to the car. Every report, every code read, every part replaced. Attorney Hector Morales was a man of about the authoritative bearing of someone accustomed to having things done his way. His gray suit was clearly designer. His watch gleamed with the unmistakable sparkle of genuine gold. and his Italian shoes probably cost more than the Mendoza family's entire monthly budget. When Don Esteban introduced Rodrigo as the mechanic who would solve his problem, the lawyer evaluated him with a skeptical look that swept from his worn shoes to his faded shirt. "This is your expert?" asked the lawyer in a tone bordering on contempt. "Don Esteban, with all due respect, I've been waiting 10 days. I've missed important meetings because I don't have my vehicle, and now you're telling me that someone else is going to try. Counselor, I guarantee you that Rodrigo is the best mechanic I have. If anyone can solve the problem with your Suburban, it's him," Don Esteban replied with a conviction that surprised Rodrigo. "I've heard enough guarantees," replied the lawyer, glancing at a Rolex that probably cost as much as a small car. "I'll give you until Friday at 6 p.m. If my truck isn't perfect by then, I'll take it to the dealership and you'll pay me the full repair costs, plus compensation for the inconvenience. Are we clear?" Don Esteban paled but nodded. Rodrigo simply walked over to the Suburban, his expression neutral, but his mind already working. He completely ignored the tension between the other two men and began his usual ritual, observing the vehicle from all angles before even touching it. The SUV was imposing with its impeccable black bodywork and chrome wheels that reflected the midday sun. Rodrigo walked around, noting every detail. The tires were brand new Michelin. The exhaust showed no signs of abnormal smoke. The suspension seemed level. From the outside, everything looked perfect. "I need the keys and all the work reports," Rodrigo said without taking his eyes off the vehicle. The lawyer handed him the keys with a brusque gesture. "I'm hoping for a miracle, Mr. Mendoza." Rodrigo Mendoza did not extend his hand, knowing that it would probably not be returned, and he was right. Once the lawyer left in a taxi, leaving behind a trail of expensive cologne and frustration, Rodrigo entered the workshop. The familiar smell enveloped him. Oil, gasoline, hot metal, that aroma that was practically his perfume. Kevin and Brandon looked at him with a mixture of curiosity and relief. Chewy, who had been working on a Chevy Malibu at the back of the workshop, approached with a serious expression. "Glad to see you, buddy," Chewy said, but there was discomfort in his voice. "I just came for the trim," Rodrigo replied, making it clear that he wasn't there for reconciliation or nostalgia, where Esteban handed him a folder with all the reports. Rodrigo reviewed it meticulously while drinking watered-down coffee from the old machine in the workshop. The guys had done a thorough job, he had to admit. They had scanned codes, P0300, random misfires, P001, lean mixture in bank 1, P420, catalyst efficiency below threshold. They had changed the spark plugs, the ignition coils, cleaned the injectors, replaced the MAF sensor and the oxygen sensor. They had checked the fuel pressure, checked the vacuum lines, inspected the intake system. On paper, they had done everything right, but Rodrigo knew that cars, especially modern ones with their complex electronic systems, sometimes required more than just following standard protocols. They required understanding the language each machine spoke. He started the Suburban. The 5.3L B8 engine started smoothly, its deep purr filling the workshop. Rodrigo closed his eyes and listened. It was something he had learned from his own teacher decades ago. An engine tells you its story if you know how to listen. At first, everything sounded normal, but after about 30 seconds, he detected something. A slight irregular ticking, almost imperceptible, that did not match the rhythm of the engine. "When does the problem occur?" Rodrigo asked. "It's intermittent," replied Kevin, the young mechanic, with obvious frustration in his voice. "Sometimes it works perfectly for an hour. Then suddenly it loses power and that noise appears and disappears." Rodrigo nodded. Intermittent problems were the most difficult to diagnose because they required patience and constant observation. He took the Suburban out of the workshop and drove it around the neighborhood. He drove down Lopez Cotilla. Then he took Vallarta Avenue West, merging with the chaotic midday traffic. City buses spewed black smoke. Street vendors zigzagged between cars stopped at traffic lights. The sun turned the asphalt into a mirror of heat. For the first 15 minutes, the Suburban behaved perfectly. Acceleration was smooth, throttle response immediate. The engine purred contentedly. But then, just as Rodrigo accelerated to merge onto the freeway entrance ramp, Lázaro Cárdenas felt the glitch. It was subtle, as if someone had cut off the fuel supply for a fraction of a second. The SUV hesitated, the tachometer shook, and that strange noise appeared again. Now it was more pronounced. Rodrigo found a place to park near Agua Azul Park. He opened the hood and began his real inspection. He wasn't satisfied with just a cursory glance. He ran his hands over every hose, checking not only to see if they were connected, but also for micro cracks that could cause intermittent vacuum leaks. He checked every electrical connection for corrosion or bare wires. He moved each component, applying pressure in different directions to see if anything was loose. It was when he moved the wiring harness near the intake manifold that he felt something abnormal. There was a wire that seemed to be rubbing against a hot part of the engine. The friction had worn away the insulation at a tiny point, almost invisible to the naked eye. When the engine got hot enough and the wire expanded slightly from the heat, it made intermittent contact with the metal of the engine, causing a momentary short circuit. Rodrigo smiled for the first time in months. He had found at least part of the problem, but his experience told him that when there was an intermittent symptom, especially in modern vehicles, there was rarely a single cause. The damaged wire explained the intermittent electrical failures, but it did not fully explain the poor mixture that the codes had reported. He returned to the workshop with the Suburban and asked for the lift. Don Esteban ordered the boys to clear the space immediately. Rodrigo raised the vehicle and slid underneath on his old creeper, rolling smoothly over the oil-stained concrete floor. With a work light illuminating the underside, another meticulous inspection began. The exhaust system appeared to be fine. There were no obvious leaks. The rear oxygen sensors were correctly installed. But when Rodrigo followed the intake tube to the rear, he found something that made him let out a bitter laugh. There was a small crack in the plastic tube connecting the crankcase gas recirculation system. It was tiny, maybe half a centimeter long, but enough to introduce unmetered air into the system, causing the computer to detect a lean mixture. The brilliant and frustrating thing about the problem was that both faults were nearly invisible during a standard inspection. The cable only failed when it reached a certain temperature and expanded, and the crack in the tube was at an angle that made it virtually invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. He got off the lift with the complete diagnosis. It was already 5 p.m. Almost 6 hours had passed between the test drive and the inspection. Don Esteban was waiting anxiously for him in his office. "Well?" asked the workshop owner, his voice tense. "I found two problems," explained Rodrigo, showing photos he had taken with his old Nokia cell phone. A cable damaged by thermal friction and a crack in the PVC tube. Both intermittent, both almost impossible to detect without knowing exactly what to look for. The repair itself is simple. Relocate and repair the wiring harness and replace the tube. 2 hours of work max. Don Esteban let out a sigh of relief so deep that it seemed to deflate his entire body. "Thank God. Do you need us to buy the parts?" "The tube is specific to the model, but I can repair the cable with material I have." Rodrigo paused. "I need the workshop to myself tomorrow morning, without interruptions, without anyone looking over my shoulder. And I want full payment in cash when I'm done, of course. Whatever you need." Don Esteban extended his hand, but Rodrigo did not take it. "This is just a job, Don Esteban, nothing more." Rodrigo arrived at the workshop at 7 a.m. on Wednesday, 2 hours before it officially opened. Don Esteban had given him a temporary key and had kept his word to leave the space free. Dawn painted the sky orange and pink, and the air still retained some of the night's coolness before the heat of the day set in. The empty workshop had an almost ghostly quality. The silent lifts, the tools organized in their cabinets, the swept floor waiting for the day's oil stains. Rodrigo turned on the lights and stood in the center for a moment, breathing deeply. This had been his domain, his kingdom, the place where he had been more than just an employee. He had been an artist working with metal and engines. He prepared his work area with the meticulousness that characterized everything he did. He laid out his tools on a clean towel, organized by size and function. He placed the SUV on the lift and raised it to a comfortable working height. He turned on the old workshop radio, a norteño music station that played songs by Vicente Fernandez and Los Tigres del Norte. The technical work was exactly as he had predicted. First, he repaired the damaged cable, carefully insulating it with high-temperature heat tape and relocating it away from any heat sources using new clamps. Then he installed the new PCB system tube, making sure all connections were perfectly sealed. He cleared the error codes from the computer and performed 3 startup and shutdown cycles to verify that they did not reappear. By 10 p.m., the repair was complete, but Rodrigo didn't stop there. He did something that went beyond the contracted work. He performed a complete preventive maintenance inspection. He checked fluid levels. He inspected the brakes, checked the suspension, examined the cooling system, found a few issues that would need attention in the near future, and noted them in a detailed report, not because he was asked to, but because that was how he worked. A job well done was not just about solving the immediate problem. It was about ensuring that the vehicle was in optimal condition. When he finally finished around noon, Rodrigo took it for 3 test drives. The Suburban ran like new, smooth, and powerful, without the slightest hesitation. The check engine light did not come on once. That strange noise had completely disappeared. It was exactly what was expected of a premium vehicle of that category. Don Esteban arrived at the workshop at 2 p.m. with Mr. Morales. The lawyer had the same skeptical expression as before, clearly expecting another disappointment. Rodrigo handed him the keys without saying a word. "The truck is ready. I solved the problems and performed a complete inspection. Here is a detailed report of what I found and what I did," said Rodrigo, handing him a 3-page document written in his clear and precise handwriting. Mr. Morales read the report with growing interest. It was evident that it had been prepared by someone who understood not only mechanics, but also how to communicate with demanding customers. Each problem was explained in clear but not condescending terms. Every solution was justified, every future recommendation substantiated. "Impressive," murmured the lawyer, "more professional than some reports I've received from official agencies." He looked at Rodrigo with new appreciation. "Can I test drive it?" "Of course, I'll accompany you if you like." For the next half hour, Rodrigo drove the lawyer through different types of roads, busy city streets, fast avenues, and even up the highway that led to the spring forest to test the truck on steep inclines. The Suburban performed perfectly at all times. Mr. Morales, who had started the ride with his arms crossed and a suspicious look on his face, gradually relaxed. "This is exactly how it should have been from the beginning," Mr. Morales finally said. When they returned to the workshop, he turned to Don Esteban. "Why didn't you put this man on the case from day one?" Don Esteban didn't know how to respond. Rodrigo simply waited with a blank expression on his face. Mr. Morales took out his checkbook. "How much do I owe you?" 5,000 pesos for the diagnosis and repair, plus the cost of the parts, which was 100, Rodrigo replied firmly. It was a fair rate, neither inflated nor too modest. The lawyer didn't even blink. He wrote a check for 8,000 pesos. "The extra 2,000 is for your professional work and detailed report. And here's my card. If you ever decide to open your own shop, I'd like to be your customer." Rodrigo took the card and check without saying a word. He simply nodded respectfully. After the lawyer left, satisfied at the wheel of his SUV, Don Esteban was left alone with Rodrigo in the workshop, which was slowly filling up with the other mechanics returning from their lunch break. "I owe you more than money," Don Esteban began. "You saved my skin, Rodrigo. Without this job, the lawyer would have destroyed my reputation." Rodrigo silently put his tools away, each in its specific place in his metal box. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm but firm. "Don Esteban, I've been surviving on odd jobs for more than 3 months. I've walked all over the city carrying my toolbox. I've worked under the sun in garages without roofs. I've been paid 500 pesos for what I used to earn 5,000. I've seen my wife work wonders with the little money that comes in. I've seen my daughters study with borrowed books because I can't afford to buy them new ones." Don Esteban lowered his head, unable to hold Rodrigo's gaze. "All this time," Rodrigo continued, "I've walked past this workshop almost every day. I've seen how things started to go wrong. I knew this was going to happen, not because I wanted you to fail, but because I know this business. Experience isn't just a nice word on a resume. It's the difference between solving a problem and just following protocols and hoping they work." "You were right," Don Esteban admitted. His voice was barely a whisper. "I made a terrible mistake. I thought I could save money. that the young guys would be enough. I didn't understand that I was destroying what we had built together. Rodrigo closed his toolbox with a final metallic click. What you did to me wasn't right, Don Esteban. You threw me away like an old rag after 15 years of loyalty. But today I didn't come for you. I came for myself because I'm a mechanic. And a good mechanic can't leave a problem unsolved. Don Esteban took an envelope out of his shirt pocket. This is your payment. 6,000 pesos for today's work, plus another 10,000 as an apology. Rodrigo took the envelope and counted the money. 16,000 pesos. It was more money than he had earned in the last 2 months combined. He thought of Lupita, of the school fees, of the groceries, of all the overdue bills. He thought of his pride, his dignity, everything he had had to swallow during these difficult months. Is there anything else? Said Don Esteban, his voice trembling slightly. I want you to come back, not as a regular employee, but as a partner with 30% of the business. Your name on the sign, Rodriguez Mendoza Workshop. Complete control of the technical area. The guys work under your supervision and a fair salary, better than before. Rodrigo looked around the workshop, saw Chuy working on the Malibu, Kevin and Brandon organizing tools, all of them glancing at him furtively, clearly aware that something important was happening. This place had been his life for rough years. He knew every crack in the concrete floor, every oil stain, every worn tool. I need to think about it, Rodrigo finally said. Sure, take your time. But Rodrigo, Don Esteban put a hand on his former employee's shoulder. I want you to know something. I'm not offering this just because you saved me with Mr. Morales. I'm offering it to you because these months have taught me something I should have known all along. A business isn't built with numbers on a spreadsheet. It's built with people who know their craft, who care about quality, who have that je ne sais quoi that makes the difference between an acceptable job and an excellent job. Rodrigo said goodbye with a simple nod and left the workshop. The July afternoon sun hit him like a solid wall of heat. He walked down Lopez Cotilla toward his house, but this time his stride was different. It wasn't the heavy gait of a desperate unemployed man, nor the angry walk of a betrayed man. It was something in between, something he was still defining. At home, Lupita was preparing hibiscus tea when he arrived. Fernanda and Monica were doing their homework at the dining room table, surrounded by books and notebooks. When they saw their father, the three women looked up, reading in his face that something had changed. Rodrigo placed the envelope with the money on the table. 16,000 pesos. I repaired an important client's truck at Don Esteban's workshop. Lupita opened the envelope. Her eyes widened when she saw the amount. Rodrigo, this is wonderful. There's more, he continued, sitting heavily in a chair. Don Esteban offered me a return, not as an employee, but as a partner. 30% of the business. My name on the sign. A better salary than before. Silence filled the small room. Fernanda and Monica exchanged glances. Lupita put the envelope on the table and sat down across from her husband. What do you want to do? She asked simply. It was the right question, the only one that mattered. For 3 months, Rodrigo had done what he needed to do, not what he wanted to do. He had swallowed his pride, accepted low-paying jobs, walked miles under the sun, all out of necessity, not choice. I don't know, Rodrigo admitted. Part of me wants to reject the offer, tell him it's too late, that he can't buy my forgiveness with a partnership, that betrayal can't be erased just like that. And the other part, asked Lupita, knowing her husband well enough to sense his inner conflict. The other part thinks about you, about being able to pay the school fees without anxiety, about having a stable income, about going back to doing what I love in a proper place, not in makeshift garages. Rodrigo ran a hand through his gray hair. The other side also thinks that maybe, just maybe, Don Esteban learned his lesson, that this time things would be different. Fernanda, the eldest, spoke for the first time. Dad, we've seen you suffer these past few months. You didn't tell us, but we knew. We saw you leave every morning without knowing if you would come back with or without work. We saw you count every peso, worry about every expense, but we also saw you maintain your dignity, added Monica. You never gave up. You never stopped looking. You never lost your pride in your work. Lupita took her husband's hands in hers. Rodrigo Mendoza, you married me 23 years ago when you had nothing but a toolbox and a dream. We raised these girls together through good times and bad. If there's one thing I've learned in all these years, it's that you always do the right thing, even if it's the hard thing. I don't know what the right thing is in this case, Rodrigo confessed. Then don't decide based on money or pride, Lupita said wisely. Decide based on what makes you happy. Decide based on what makes you feel that your life has purpose. That night, Rodrigo couldn't sleep. He got up at 3 a.m. and went out to the small backyard of his house. The sky was clear, unusually clear for Guadalajara, and the stars sparkled like diamonds scattered on black velvet. He thought of his father, who had been a carpenter, a man who had taught him the value of a job well done. My son, his father used to say, a man is defined by the quality of what he creates, not by the amount of money he earns. He thought of his teacher, Don Jacinto, who had taught him the trade of mechanics when Rodrigo was just 17 years old. Don Jacinto had died 5 years ago, but his words remained. A good mechanic is not the one who knows the most theory, but the one who understands that every car has a soul, and your job is to take care of that soul. He thought about the last 3 months, about every humiliation, every rejection, every night lying awake, worrying about the future. But he also thought about today, about how he had felt working on that Suburban, not out of obligation or desperation, but for the pure pleasure of solving a complex problem. That feeling of satisfaction when the engine finally purred perfectly and you knew you had done something important, something well done. On Friday morning, Rodrigo walked into the Rodriguez workshop for the last time as a visitor. Don Esteban was waiting for him at the entrance, nervous, clearly not having slept well, waiting for the answer. "Good morning, Don Esteban," Rodrigo said formally. "Good morning, Rodrigo. Have you made a decision?" Rodrigo looked at the workshop sign, faded by years of sun and rain. He looked inside, where his colleagues were working on different cars. He looked at his own hands, the hands that defined who he was. "I accept the partnership," he said finally, "but with additional conditions." Don Esteban's face lit up. "Whatever they are, first a written contract reviewed by a lawyer, everything in order, legal and clear. Second, immediate investment in training for Kevin and Brandon. They're not bad guys, they just lack experience and proper training. Third, equipment upgrades. We can't compete with modern workshops if we're working with tools from 20 years ago. Fourth, a clear employee treatment policy. No one will be fired without just cause and proper process." Don Esteban listened attentively, nodding at each point. "I accept everything." "Anything else?" "Yes," Rodrigo paused, an apology, a genuine one, not as a business justification, but as one man to another. "I need to hear you say that what you did was wrong, not just that it was a miscalculation." Don Esteban took a deep breath. When he spoke, his voice was charged with genuine emotion. "Rodrigo, what I did to you was despicable. It wasn't just bad business. It was a betrayal of a friend, a compadre, someone who had given everything for this workshop. I treated you as disposable when you were irreplaceable. I made you feel worthless when in reality you were the heart of this place. And I did it not out of real necessity, but out of greed, thinking I could make more money by cutting back where I shouldn't have. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I failed you. And if you give me this chance, I'll spend the rest of my day proving that I've learned my lesson." There were tears in the older man's eyes. Rodrigo saw in that moment not the boss who had betrayed him, but the friend who had made a terrible mistake and was genuinely sorry. "Then let's work together," said Rodrigo, finally extending his hand. As partners, as equals, the handshake was firm, sealing not only a business agreement, but a difficult and painful reconciliation. The other mechanics, who had been watching discreetly, began to applaud. Chuy approached and hugged Rodrigo, his eyes also moist. The following months brought profound changes to the Rodriguez in Mendoza workshop, as the new sign painted in green and gold now read. Rodrigo implemented a continuous training system where he personally taught Kevin and Brandon the subtleties of diagnosis that the manuals could not teach. They purchased modern diagnostic equipment, a new wheel balancer, and a professional scanner that could read even the most complex codes. Mr. Morales kept his word by referring customers from his social circle. The shop's reputation began to grow, not only regaining lost customers, but also attracting new ones. Rodrigo discovered that being a partner brought different responsibilities, but also different satisfactions. He participated in business decisions, growth strategies, and future plans. Fernanda and Monica were able to continue their studies without worries. In fact, with the improved income, Rodrigo began saving for their future college tuition. Jupiter was finally able to reduce her hours at the grocery store, devoting more time to a small home-based baking business she had always wanted to start. One afternoon in November, almost 8 months after his return, Rodrigo was teaching Brandon how to diagnose a complex problem in a BMW when an unfamiliar car pulled up in front of the workshop. A young man dressed in work clothes got out of the car, carrying an old but well-maintained toolbox. "Good afternoon," the young man said shyly. "I'm looking for work as a mechanic. I was told this is the best workshop in the area." Rodrigo looked at the boy and saw in his eyes the same mixture of hope and nervousness that he himself had felt decades ago when he was looking for his first opportunity. He looked at Don Esteban, who was watching the scene from his office. Their eyes met, and Don Esteban nodded almost imperceptibly. "What's your name?" Rodrigo asked. Miguel Angel Fuentes. I have a CONALEP certificate and 2 years of experience in a small workshop in Tonalá. Why did you leave your previous job?" The young man hesitated, then he answered honestly. The owner closed the workshop. He said it was no longer profitable. Rodrigo smiled, recognizing his honesty. "What can you do?" "Basic services, brakes, suspension. I'm learning about modern electronic systems, but I admit I still have a long way to go." "Honesty is a good start," Rodrigo said. "We have a policy in this shop. We value experience, we train continuously, and we treat our employees with respect. If you're willing to learn and work hard, there's a place for you here." Miguel Angel's eyes lit up. "Really, sir, really? But call me Rodrigo." "No, sir. Here we work as a team, not as bosses and subordinates." Rodrigo extended his hand. "Welcome to Rodriguez Sin Mendoza Workshop." As he shook the new employee's hand, Rodrigo felt that the circle had been completed. He had gone through betrayal, loss, struggle, and redemption. He had learned that a man's true value was not measured in the easy moments, but in how he got up after the falls. He had learned that forgiveness was not forgetting, but choosing to build something new on the ruins of what was broken. That night, as Rodrigo closed the workshop and walked home under the starry sky of Guadalajara, he carried more than just the day's earnings. He carried the satisfaction of knowing that he had made the right decision, not the easiest one, not the one that fed his wounded pride, but the one that honored who he was at his core. Life would continue to bring challenges, that was certain. But Rodrigo Mendoza, mechanic, partner, father, husband, had learned the most important one, that true success is not measured by never falling, but by always having the strength to get back up. And as he walked through the familiar streets of his neighborhood, greeting neighbors, listening to the murmur of the city that never completely sleeps, Rodrigo knew he was exactly where he should be, doing exactly what he should be doing. It wasn't a perfect ending, because real life never has perfect endings, but it was an honest ending, earned through hard work, integrity, and the willingness to give both others and himself a second chance. The workshop would continue, engines would continue to need repair, and Rodrigo Mendoza would continue to do what he did best: transform broken things into something that works, whether they were cars or human relationships. And in that simple purpose, he found all the meaning he needed.